You are listening to Skin, Earth, Vitality, the podcast where ancient wisdom meets modern vitality. If you are seeking to reconnect with your innate vibrancy, you're in the right place. I'm Emily Davis, a seasoned holistic esthetician and herbalist. Join me as we unlock the secrets of ancient skincare practices, explore the beauty of seasonal and nature-based living, herbalism, and true holistic well-being for you and the broader ecosystem. This podcast is brought to you by Stratum Aesthetics. Head to stratumaesthetics.com to find curated skincare, body care, and other wellness products hand-selected by me. Now enjoy the show. Please remember that the information I share in this podcast is based on my personal and professional experience and is intended for educational and informational purposes only. It is not individualized skincare advice, nor is it medical advice. I encourage you to take charge of your own health decisions and listen to your body, seeking out the resources and professionals that best support your wellness journey. Welcome in. I'm so grateful we get to hang out today. If you are new and this is your first time listening, hello, I'm Emily. Welcome. If you are a returning loyal listener, welcome back. I'm so grateful you're here. I know that I shared last week that I would be talking about skincare again, finally today, but I had an idea midweek that I think is really going to set the stage for what I want to share about next week, which is really about herbalism and then kind of like how I tie herbalism in with skincare. So we're going to talk about that next week. But today I want to talk about how my perspective on holistic living has changed a little over the last few years, because I really thought I knew what that meant. But since becoming an herbalist, since learning more about vitalism, which just means that the body has its own innate healing intelligence and that our job isn't to control it, but to support and cooperate with the natural life force that we all have within us. So since spending time exploring both that as well as ancient systems and even gardening, my perspective has shifted a little. And I think one thing that I do want to be sure to say early in this episode is that my hope is that this episode awakens some new curiosity within you. And take what resonates with you, leave the rest, take what feels true and good, let go of everything else. My conversations are always meant to be a jumping point that give you some things that I've been mulling over in my mind and giving them to you so you can consider them further and integrate them into your life as you deem appropriate. So I grew up living in a very natural living lifestyle my whole life. My mom is a retired naturopathic doctor. I grew up with her practicing iridology, which is reading the patterns and colors and like markings on the iris of your eye and seeing that as a reflection of what's happening in the body. And it's based on the idea that the eyes are like a map of our whole body, of our overall health. And so I grew up with that. I grew up with taking herbs instead of over-the-counter cold and flu medicine and eating organic. And I continued this lifestyle on my own into my 20s and my 30s. And it's just always been my whole life the way that I've lived. And I used to think that holistic living was about like what you avoid, what you're not eating, what you're not buying, or what you are buying. And I'll talk today about how living a natural lifestyle I now see as being a little bit different than living a holistic lifestyle. And I've kind of evolved past like solely the natural lifestyle thing. I think it's a little bit simplistic and can be based very strongly in consumer culture. And we know our bodies are so much more than consumer culture. They are so much more ancient than that. And of course, I still do live a natural lifestyle. That hasn't gone away, but it's just evolved into something a little bit more deeper and more textured. There's a little bit more juice there. And it's giving me more breadth, ironically, in this way that I'm seeing holistic living now. But simultaneously, it's been about simplifying and paring down and not needing to constantly buy supplements and like biohack my way to health. And so if we strip away all of the outside noise and the marketing and the photos of perfect, beautiful women with their long blonde hair and their frocks in their farmhouse kitchen, holistic living isn't just about that. It's not just about clean eating or yoga or even non-toxic skincare products, although these all can be pieces of it. But holistic living is not an aesthetic. It's not a shopping list. It has nothing to do with what anyone else is trying to influence you to do. Holistic living is a worldview. You know, a lot of modern wellness, things that we might think of as holistic on the surface, are actually quite reductionist, which is the opposite of holistic. So reductionist meaning that it focuses on one part at a time, like fix your gut, balance your hormones, detox your liver, all of these messages. And so holistic living zooms out, and actually the solution may not live where the symptom shows up. An example of this, last week I talked about decluttering your whole life, and I'm really expanding the topics of these shows because everything here is about holistic living, and it's been, in conjunction with my evolution of my view of what holistic living is. I'm broadening the topics, and that's why I talked about decluttering your whole life last week, because it's so hard for me to explain how this actually affects other things. I think you can't fully grasp it until it's actually done, when you go in and start doing the decluttering and noticing how it's affecting other parts of your life, how working on your digestion, which I talked about in last week's episode as part of decluttering your whole life, how working on your digestion affects your ability to make more confident decisions and feel more aligned all throughout your life. And so I'll talk today a little bit more about, like I said, a lot of modern wellness is quite reductionist and not quite as holistic as it seems on the surface. But I do want to share that this is not a, like, I'm wagging my finger at you, you're doing things wrong conversation, because that's such a turnoff. And there's so much bossy pants energy. I think it's very rampant in the holistic living as an aesthetic world. And so think of this more as like I'm here to explore. I'm here to be curious. I am not here to impress, and I'm certainly not here to be influenced. And so just keep all of that in mind as we're walking through this conversation about what holistic living is as I see it now, what, in my opinion, it's not, and some ways that I have worked to make my life feel more juicy, make it feel a little like I've jumped into the deep end of what there is to offer from living a truly holistic life, and how I feel better in my body than I ever have before. So today I'm going to attempt to answer 3 different questions. The first one, what actually is holistic living as I see it now? How is it different than just being like quote unquote healthy or quote unquote natural. And then third is, with this in mind, how do we make life feel more nourishing and make healthy living feel not so much like a to-do list, or how to stop overthinking what to eat, what to buy, what to do, by rebuilding trust in our bodies and intuition instead of outsourcing every answer. So we'll start with what actually is holistic living. Holistic living, as I see it, is just this ongoing practice. It is a lifelong practice of moving through the world and seeing your body as a whole interconnected system that's constantly communicating with its environment. And I think it can be very tempting to think of holistic health as being very mystical, which just know that something being mystical in my mind does not mean it's less true. But I know that that can have maybe less seriousness or less scientifically rigorous connections for some. And holistic living is not that. It is highly scientifically rigorous because it's grounded in something called systems biology, which is the understanding that no function happens in isolation. No cell is an island. Our skin, our digestion, our mood, our hormones, our immune system, they are all linked through shared networks in our body, like our nervous system and our endocrine system, our microbiome. So we're understanding that when one part of our network shifts, the others are going to respond. Holistic living isn't some like crunchier or softer, on the other hand, alternative to biomedical thinking. I see it as a more accurate reflection of how biology works. There's this fantastic book called Holistic Medicine and the Extracellular Matrix, and it talks about how traditional cell therapy once described each cell as an independent unit. So it was once thought that each cell was an island, and it was like this little captain steering its own ship. But research over the last century has shown that that is not how life functions. There was an Austrian scientist and doctor in the mid-1900s named Alfred Pischinger who kind of expanded and corrected some of what was thought about cell theory previously. His work showed that cells aren't this island. They're constantly talking to their neighbors through a shared network of fluids and connective tissue and electrical signals, and that your body is a symphony and really shouldn't be treated like a machine. And so Matthew Wood's book talks all about this and how each cell is actually influenced so deeply by the extracellular matrix, which is like the fluids that it sits in. And that a healthy cell can actually be put in fluids that are not optimal, and the cell is going to start acting completely differently. And so the ideas from Pischinger have become the foundations for neuroimmunology, for fascia research, and also for terrain-based models of health, which basically just means like instead of seeing illness as something that just like randomly attacks you, the terrain model looks at what's happening within your body, within your immune system, your stress, your nutrition, your environment, and that all of that either is going to make you a good host for imbalances or not. And what we know from cellular biology holds true at the whole body level, of course. No part operates in isolation. And holistic living is all about maintaining coherence in your whole ecosystem. Considering that your thoughts, your breath, the food you're eating, your light exposure, how bright your nights are and how dark your days may be, all of these factors send information through your nervous system and your endocrine system, shaping how your body is going to allocate energy and resources. And stress and disconnection and overstimulation are all going to actually create fragmentation. Of course, blood flow is going to shift away from where it needs to be in the digestive process or where it needs to be within skin repair to go attend to all of these other things, because we've got like cortisol rising and inflammation increasing. But practices like mindful breathing and time in nature and herbs that are nourishing, these can all help to restore that coherence by helping to regulate our body's rhythms, right? And so that's what holistic living is, I think, from like a modern science point of view. But what has actually shifted so dramatically in my perspective recently is that holistic living is about your participation. It's about how you're dancing with life. It's really about living in alignment with the intelligence of your body, with the intelligence of nature. And every medicine system, every ancient medicine system teaches us this, that it's all about supporting that intelligence and trusting that the body knows how to self-correct when it's given the right conditions. There's this word in Sanskrit called tapas, and I love this word. It means sacred fire. It's fire that keeps you showing up for the little things that make you feel alive. And I think that's really what this is all about, this dance with life. It's about feeling more alive in your body, just more head over heels with life. And to me, holistic living is what happens when our life feels textured again, when we taste our food, when we're able to notice how your energy is rising and falling throughout the day, throughout your cycle, throughout the seasons, throughout the different seasons of your life, understanding that and learning how to work with it instead of against it. And that's not to say that you're just every single day going to feel 100% like it's summer. It just means that you're working with your energy again instead of against it. This book that I read recently that really got me thinking about just like even deeper about all of the different cycles and the way our energy changes and a way how like energy slumps actually are an amazing thing is called Wild Power by Alexandra Pope. And it's all about harnessing your menstrual cycle for emotional healing and personal empowerment and even spiritual growth. So I highly recommend that book. I loved it. And I think that understanding our cycles of life and menstrual cycle is just a microcosm of the macrocosm is a really wonderful way to truly step into that holistic living. So with all of this in mind, we come to our next question, which is how is this different than being healthy or being natural? And like I already touched on, wellness trends, I think, still come often from the same mindset as the biomedical model, which is all about controlling every variable and biohacking every system. And I think true holistic living just like flips that on its head. And it's about creating the conditions for life to actually regulate itself. And I think just being like quote unquote healthy sees health as a result. So we're trying to get to the goal of clear skin or balanced hormones or better digestion. And none of these are wrong. Like I want all of those things. That's great. But when we're viewing it just as that, it's keeping our body as this object that we're micromanaging all the time. And it feels a little more transactional to me. And then natural living, also great. Love it. I do it. I think that natural living can stop at the surface and really just focus on like what we're using or what we're consuming, we're swapping synthetic stuff for plant-based stuff, or conventional for organic, or processed for whole foods. And these are, like I said, these are great changes. They reduce the toxic load and they support sustainability. We like these, but they don't automatically shift the relationship that we have with our bodies, and they don't shift the relationship that we are holding with nature and with the earth. You can replace every product in your house with clean versions and still live in a high stress and disconnected way. I mean, you can drink all the green juices and still be very disconnected from your body's intelligence. It's because we're just surface level swapping and we're not coming into like a system level shift. We want to go a little bit deeper and recognize the quality of the energy that's running through our whole life. And that's why things like prana and daily rituals really matter. We'll talk about them in a little bit. They create this energetic coherence rather than just like a chemical purity. And I also think that the natural mindset can turn into kind of like a performance, like the cleanest diet, the purest products, the most toxin-free, quote unquote, toxin-free life. And I know this well because I'm speaking from experience, but we can go a little bit deeper and ask like how all of these choices we're making are actually interacting with our energy and interacting with the whole rest of our life. So this moves us into our last question, which is that with all of this in mind, everything we've talked about, how do we make life feel more nourishing? How can we make healthy living feel not so much like a to-do list? And how do we stop overthinking what we eat, what we buy, and instead rebuild trust in our body and in our intuition, instead of feeling the need to always outsource every answer? And in answering this, there's obviously a risk of trying to oversimplify something very complex. I mean, it's kind of my life's work to answer this last question, and so I can't just share it in a little 10-minute clip. You know, it kind of made me think of my beef with intuitive eating. Like, you can't just say like, oh, listen to your intuition, when maybe intuition isn't fully online because we've lived a life tamping down our intuition. It's very common to be disconnected from intuition, especially in our culture. And I just thought of that because as I was like thinking about how to answer this question, like a lot of it was like, well, listen to your intuition. And I was like, no, we're not doing that. So I'm going to attempt to give a list of how I have moved from just simply living a very quote unquote natural or healthy lifestyle into more of this holistic lifestyle as I've described it. And as you do all of these things, I would invite you to reflect weekly, like, what's working with this? What feels off? What do I need maybe more of or less of? Because our body's going to speak to us through patterns. We want to pay really close attention to what's happening with our digestion and with our sleep patterns, with our skin, our mood. And we want to pay attention to these and then respond to the feedback instead of just like reacting, knee-jerk reacting to symptoms. So first thing, no surprise, start with rhythm, specifically circadian rhythm, which if you've been around, you know that I think this is like foundation of everything. We want to anchor our day with consistent waking with the sun, honoring the darkness at night, because this rhythm is true regulation for all of the systems of our body. The next one is, again, no surprise, engage with the seasons. So we've got our circadian rhythm, and then we have our infradian rhythm. And the infradian rhythms are going to be the longer rhythms of our life. So like your cycle, the seasons, anything longer than 24 hours. And so with seasonal living, we want to work on adjusting our food to what is naturally available that time of the season, adjusting our pace to mirror our environment. I talk quite a bit about seasonal living. I just a couple of episodes ago did one about fall seasonal living. I'll have one about winter seasonal living when we get to the winter. So keep your eyes out for those. But this really just keeps that internal terrain in sync with our external terrain, and it builds adaptability, which is a big measure of our health. So we've talked about getting in rhythm with these different cycles. Daily, we want to work on building rituals. And this is why I have fallen so in love with Ayurveda. They are so into daily rituals because it teaches that our health is created through rhythm and consistency with these like tiny actions every day. So things like tongue scraping and oiling the skin, rising with the sun, eating meals very regularly to keep your digestion and energy stable. And this is so important because it allows our energy, our prana, to circulate more freely throughout our body, which is what we want. Just like within our house, we want the electricity to be able to circulate. Ayurveda teaches that what you do every day matters so much more than what you decide to do occasionally. Building this devotion to your own life's rhythm helps to prevent chaos. And talking about that prana, that energy circulating throughout your body, the next thing on the list is to reclaim your energy, to notice where you're leaking energy. So that could be through like overstimulation, late night scrolling, even things like skipping meals or rushing out the door in the morning. Notice these all kind of give a nod back to what I talked about last week with decluttering your life. And so with this energy management, adding practices that cultivate that prana. So getting sunlight, doing slow breath work in the morning, eating whole foods, spending time outdoors. All of this is so important because your vitality is reflective of how freely life and energy is moving through you. And finally on the list is working with herbs, really thinking of herbs as our teachers, not in a chasing trends or listening to what someone on TikTok is telling you that you need to take ashwagandha or whatever it is. And so this is a good segue into what I want to talk about next week, which is what even is herbalism. And I want to talk about what herbalism is, and I'm going to talk about why I think herbal-based skincare is so magical, why it's different than just like natural or plant-based skincare. And yeah, I can't wait to talk about that next week. So today we answered 3 questions. We answered what actually is holistic health, how is it different than just being healthy or natural, and then how can we actually lean into this lifestyle? I hope that this has been valuable to you. If it has been, do me a favor, reach out to me, let me know. I really, really love hearing about it. You can leave a comment on Spotify, send me an email, make sure that you are signed up for my weekly Moon Day newsletter, which comes out every Monday, which is just a little love letter straight from my heart to yours. And share this with somebody who you love, who you think would find some value. I will be back next week, and until then, be well. You've been listening to Skin, Earth, Vitality. If you like what you heard today, consider giving me a 5-star rating. It helps other people just like you to find the show. You can shop products and find all of my offerings on my website, stratumaesthetics.com, and follow me on my social channels at Stratum Aesthetics.